Hey, 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 that was awesome. I was backstage getting my groove on, doing a little move here and there. Wow, thank you so much, Todrick, Ken, Phil, and Rick. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So, it was mentioned, Phil said it, he said the T word. We have a new person whose residence is on 16th in Pennsylvania. I won't say the word. But we're real clear, right? We're real clear that in order to do what we must do, we have to work in ways that we probably haven't had to work before. We're going to have to step up, and we're going to have to figure out how to shut that word up. One of the things we want you to do is take a look at a graphic that we are putting out on Facebook, and we ask you to please share it. We want you to send it out on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. It's hashtag chump change, because we need some chump change in order to create change. Every single dollar that you give counts. Another thing that I also want to call to your attention, you've seen the fabulous, fabulous Todrick Hall perform. Well, guess what? You have an opportunity to win some free tickets to see him on Broadway. Woohoo! And I know because my friend told me she saw it and it was awesome. It was awesome. Go to the 5th floor to our membership table and check out the opportunity to enter your name into a drawing, and you'll win 2 tickets. So you don't even have to sit there by yourself. It's 2 tickets you can win. But I would be willing to sit there by myself if I could get a free ticket. I'm just saying. So now we come to the time in our program where we're going to have our State of the Movement address. And I'm so pleased to introduce my colleagues at the task force. I work with these folks day in and day out, and they are just awesome, and they're coming to give you pieces of themselves and pieces of their minds, hearts, and spirits. So please give them your full attention. Welcome to the stage, Cindy Tomm, Kayley Whalen, Jorge Amaro, Victoria Kirby York, Naomi Washington Leapheart, and Ray Carey.
Hello, friends. I'm Ray Carey, and I am the Executive Director of the Task Force. I am so honored to stand here today with my colleagues, Victoria, Kayley, Cindy, Jorge, and Naomi. Like perhaps many of you, I woke up the day after the election with a lot of emotions. And not actually for partisan reasons, but for reasons much greater. I have felt a deep sadness, anger, and fear about what is about to happen in this country now that this extremist government is being installed. As of about 2 hours ago, the bully in chief has become the president, and we have our work cut out for us. We humans are born with the ability to resist. Children, even before they have the language to do so, know exactly how to express themselves. Parents in the room are laughing. To turn your head away from mashed peas, or better yet, fling them against the wall, are among our first acts of defiance. As a kid, Mine was when faced with a check-off box of either boy or girl. I crossed off both and wrote in tomboy. What can I say? Baby lesbian from the start. We do not have to learn how to resist. We just need to tap into it. We are born with what we need, individually and collectively, to resist, to survive, to stand up, and to stand together. The insistence on being who we are is at the core of transformational resistance. Resistance that is about what we refuse to accept, but also includes our vision and our hopes for our future. Transformational resistance is when we build an intersectional movement that brings us to an even better, more connected place than when we began. To survive and to thrive in this time, we will need to stand together like never before. Our resistance is required, and our insistence on hope will be among our most radical acts in the coming years. Radical, loving, fierce hope. We will be tested in our hope and in our resolve to stand together. There will be enormous pressure on all of us to be divided from each other, to turn against each other, in the hopes that our energies won't be directed towards the threats of this administration. We've seen examples of this already, like when Trump said that same-sex marriage is decided law and the right to an abortion is not. Both are law, and we will defend both in the weeks and the months ahead. We know how to rise to these challenges. While we have never seen an administration quite like this before in our lifetimes, we have been here before. We and many of our ancestors have been here before. Whether fighting slavery, fascism, the genocide of indigenous peoples and culture, McCarthyism, or the government's complicity in hundreds of thousands of deaths by AIDS, people who died from AIDS at the government's hands. We know how to organize and sustain each other. We are a resilient people. Yes, we are. Take a moment to look at the people around you. Look around this room, your table. It is deeply important that we are here together on this particular day, when a travesty of alleged democracy is taking place just down the road. No matter what Trump says, this administration will not be a friend to LGBTQ people in our families. As immigrants, as people of color, seniors, people who are incarcerated, as bi and transgender people, students, poor people, and even those of us who believe that our privilege will protect us, as LGBTQ people, we are all under threat. If there were ever a time to fight for something bigger than yourself, now is that time. If there were ever a time to take seriously that the very notion of democracy is being reshaped into something that is a far cry from democratic or participatory, today is that day. You are here at Creating Change because you know that the work for freedom, justice, and equity is far from done. Not in any state, not in any jail, not in any immigration detention center, not in any school, not in any reproductive health clinic, place of worship, not in any voting booth, and not on any street where a trans woman gets attacked or a black person gets shot. Nowhere is our work done. The choices we make today will affect generations of LGBTQ people. When future generations ask, what did you do in those years when fear threatened hope? You can say, I stepped up. If I know one thing about us, it is that we are resilient, we know how to organize, we know how to take care of each other, and we are unafraid to step up. I believe in you, and I believe in us.
Good afternoon, Creating Change. My name is Victoria Kirby, Elliott York, and I have the honor and privilege of working with these folks on the stage and all around you, and with so many of you as the National Campaigns Director at the task force. With Dr. Martin Luther King's birthday observation being earlier this week, I've been meditating on a quote of his, that there is such a thing as being too late. And I've been meditating on it, our place in history, as well as the history of this country. And I think about my own history. My great-great-grandfather, John Camper, was born to a black woman who was born shortly after slavery ended, and a white immigrant from Europe on the eastern shore of Maryland. He grew up working alongside his father on ships that came into the port of Cambridge, likely the very same port his mother's ancestors were brought through as slaves. His parents fell in love during the start of the Reconstruction era, a time of progressive change, much like the last 8 years, that due to politics similar in nature to what we're experiencing today, ended with the legal separation of the races and laws outlawing marriages of their kind, and his siblings being murdered by the likes of the Klan. His parents were born more than a century and a half earlier than me, yet we all experienced the pain of not being able to legally marry the person that we loved. So as a student of history, the 68 years following Reconstruction, filled with public accommodation and marriage restrictions, have always frightened and intrigued me. It is a reminder that progress can be challenged and overturned as quickly as it comes, and that the devastation, if not challenged, can last decades. John Camper was born in a time of promise where black people were U.S. senators, congressional representatives, and city councilmen, yet spent most of his life being told what he could and could not do because of the color of his skin and the beliefs of those in power. He even lost his farm due to some extreme racism. The Reconstruction era has become nothing more than a historical footnote. Many folks, until last night in this room, may not have even thought about it. And I can't help but think of my 8-year-old nephew, Messiah, who was born the same year that President Obama won the presidency, and has only known a nation led by someone who looks like him, a nation that affirms his auntie's marriage to a woman, and where his mother has affordable health care. I don't want the next 68 years of his life to be watching that progress be overturned. I don't want to see the election of the first black president of the United States become no more than a historical footnote. We are watching, as Reverend Barber said last night on this very stage, the rise of the third Reconstruction. Conservatives are using the same playbook they used after the Civil War and after the Civil Rights Movement to turn natural allies against each other. This time, they are using LGBTQ people, particularly our transgender, non-binary, and gender non-conforming siblings, to target black and brown communities. They've been doing this through religious imposition and bathroom exclusion laws that are eerily similar to the Jim Crow laws some of you, my grandparents and ancestors, faced. These laws on their face attack LGBTQ people, but when you actually read them and the legal precedent they set, which is really important to understand, they would gut non-discrimination and civil rights laws for everyone, hitting hardest the communities of color. So when we think about King's legacy, we've seen over the last few years the Voting Rights Act gut. And with what we're seeing across the country, a huge effort to gut the Civil Rights Act of 1964. The best example of this came in the form of North Carolina's HB 2. The law was framed in the media as solely about transgender access to bathrooms. However, HB 2 gutted the state employment discrimination court for all current protected classes, took away the ability for counties and cities to pass living wage ordinances and non-discrimination protections. So as a person of faith, watching all of these things happen in the name of the faith that I celebrate, Christianity, I have been honored to work alongside my colleagues and partners in North Carolina, like the Freedom Center for Social Justice. You all met Bishop Tanya Rawls last night. Equality North Carolina, the North Carolina NAACP, and a table of over a dozen other faith-based organizations. We know that the majority of people of faith in this country are affirming of LGBTQ equality, rights, and non-discrimination protections. You might not see that play out in the media, but it's the truth. They are working hard to repeal HB 2 by countering harm done in the name of religion. And one thing that I know for sure is that we will and we must learn from our history. If we don't work together across movements, if we don't shore up our base and sound the alarm on the conservatives' plan to use us in this room to gut protections for all, we will look up in 10 years, staring at a country we don't recognize and won't be able to win back for decades to come. There is such a thing as being too late. We have to see immigration reform, gun violence prevention, racial justice, economic justice, disability and mental health justice, reproductive justice, and more as our collective fight. We must resist the overthrow of our progress at every turn. We must continue to change hearts and minds. We must organize to build the infrastructure we need to win leadership at all levels of government, federal, state, and local. And we must not let up until we are in a position to take back our country and sustain and build upon our victories. Let us not rest in being a part of history. We must forge history, and we must do it together.
Hello, Philadelphia. Hi, I'm Kayley Whalen. I'm the Digital Strategies and Social Media Manager for the National LGBTQ Task Force. And let me tell you, I'm glad to be back in a city I often consider a second home. I went to school not far from here at a college some call Swarthmore, but as we often refer to it, the People's Republic of Swarthmore. I'm a digital organizer, so much of my work is online and behind the scenes. But there's nothing that brings me greater joy than seeing everyone here, together, in person, here at Creating Change. I am a proud transgender, Latinx, multiracial, bisexual woman with a mental health disability. Many of those identities are often invisible to others, and often I can pass through the world with a lot of privilege. But I refuse to be silent and blend in, because I know that in order to fight, I have to be visible. In order to fight, we have to be visible. My mother is in the audience right now, actually. Hi, Mom. And I wanted to use a quote from her. So I was asking her about her experience growing up as Latinx in New York City, and She told me that the way my family and your grandparents succeeded was blending in and not making a statement of being different. They made sure we spoke English. Yes, we ate different food. We knew we were different, and we built our own traditions. But it's only now that we try to understand and celebrate what we went through and what made us unique. We have a responsibility to the next generation to celebrate and fight for what makes us unique. Especially in this moment. Make no mistake, Trump, our new bully-in-chief, and his administration wants to tell you that being Latinx means you're inferior. That if you're an immigrant, you're not welcome here. And that being trans is an illness which must be fixed through reparative therapy. There are many forms of violence. One is having possibility stripped from you. Growing up, I did not know it was possible to be trans. I had no possibility models, as Laverne Cox referred to them at Creating Change in Houston. I grew up confused, not having a vocabulary to express how I understood the world or how I related to the world. I was bullied for being awkward, for being sensitive, emotional, not tough or masculine enough, and I isolated myself, focused on books and school. I was also ridiculed for being Latinx, especially by my white father, who would ridicule me and my friends who are people of color, my friends from Afghanistan and Bangladesh, tell me to get friends who had American names. In high school, I began to express myself through theater, arts, dressing up. I'd dress up in glam and goth clothes and go out to clubs and shows. And I was called a faggot. It wasn't until college that I found other trans people and developed the self-understanding that allowed me to express my gender identity. I've often heard attacks on trans women that claim that we are not really women because we do not experience girlhood. I did experience girlhood, but it was one where I could not express my truth because of a world and a society that did not understand or accept who I was. I've also sometimes been told, and more often felt, that I'm not Latinx enough because I don't speak Spanish. I didn't grow up with many of the family traditions that other Latinx families have. But that's also because those possibilities were erased from me because of racism and internalized oppression. It wasn't until attending the Racial Justice Institute at Creating Change in 2012 in Baltimore that I began to unlearn that oppression and learn the tools I needed to be proud about being Latinx. Our youth have possibility models that I never had as a kid, which fills me with hope. I've seen trans youth come out younger and younger. I saw Jazz Jennings come out on national TV at age 6. And there's even a show I talk about a lot. Maybe some of you heard about it. It's on Cartoon Network. It's by a queer writer. It features a young boy who's not afraid to be sensitive, caring, kind. A boy who can sometimes magically transform into a woman and fights a bully who sexually harasses them. Come on, Steven Universe. Who's heard of it? Yes. Yes, we have shows like Steven Universe, I Am Jazz, Orange is the New Black, and Sense8. But the visibility the trans movement now has is due to the hard work of transgender grassroots activists in their communities, especially trans women of color, fighting at the margins of society for simply the ability to survive. Right now, more than ever, we need to show the world that the next generation that a better world is possible. A future where all LGBTQ youth are accepted, loved, and valued. As the digital director of this conference, I know all of you have big dreams. Trust me. I've seen your tweets. I've read your Facebook posts. I've seen your Instagrams, and I've probably seen your snaps too. How amazing is it that we're all gathered here together in one place, in one same physical place, where we can celebrate our unique identities and make possibilities come alive. We need every activist, every artist, every imaginative, creative mind in this room to never stop dreaming. We need you. We need you to never stop dreaming, especially after this conference ends. The state of our movement must be one of possibilities for everyone. Thank you.
There's a place for us. Somewhere, a place for us. West Side Story tells a tale of young lovers who are told that they can't love who they love. Art imitates life. While theater was a safe place for me, for friends, it wasn't a complete escape from horrible things like conversion therapy, from painful journeys out of the closet, all of which were things I witnessed firsthand. My name is Tomm. I am the Major Gifts Officer here at the task force. I'm the proud mom to a 2.5-year-old daughter named Izzy, and I am a straight ally. Thank you. I'm often asked, why do you do this work? Well, simply put, my life in musical theater brought me into a space where I cried with, I held, and I loved many friends who struggled so hard to be themselves. But there's more to it than that. I want to shape the world that will eventually be the world that is my daughter's. I want to know that if Izzy is trans or gender nonconforming, that she will be loved and accepted, whatever gender he, she, or they identifies with, as I will love her. I want to know that others will accept Izzy for her whole self. And I also want to know that Izzy will accept others for who they are and be able to see people beyond socially created categories. I myself am no stranger to oppression. My father is an immigrant from China. I grew up in a mono-ethnic white community, and I did not belong. As much as I tried to assimilate, I never fit in. Some people say that Asian Americans get this pass called the honorary white status. I would disagree. I am no stranger to racial slurs, explicit exclusion, and microaggressions. I grew up with that every day of my life, and that is not the world that I want for my daughter. So a little bit about my Izzy. She's a 28-pound powerhouse. She stands about this high. She has the biggest heart. She gives the best hugs, and she is resistant as hell. 2.5 years old and resistant as hell, not a surprise. Resistance is naturally in her heart, as it's naturally in each and every one of your hearts as well. Her resistance is great, except when it comes to things like her refusing to wear socks or shoes and stuff like that. That's when I want to say, girlfriend, There are so many bigger battles out there. But at the same time, I want her to know that her voice matters. I want her to continue to resist strategically out of hope and never out of bitterness. Her spirit and determination to win energize me daily. I want her to have the courage to fight the battles that I didn't always fight. As a mother, I hold a great responsibility to live my values, but hell, I am far from perfect. And I often lack the patience to engage open-mindedly with folks who hold prejudiced or uninformed views. I get angry. I get so angry. But I still want to show her how to lead with love and acceptance, not hate or exclusion. To understand that it's incumbent upon each and every one of us as we wake up every day to do what we can to make this country, this world, a better place for all who inhabit it, including those whose experiences are far different from our own. Everything that I speak of is on a microcosmic scale, but look at where we are. We are amongst thousands of like-minded people who believe the future is a place where we can be who we truly are. The future is a place where bullies get called out. They're not enabled, and they are certainly not celebrated. A world where celebration lives in the understanding and the embracing of all of our differences. Creating change is bringing us closer to that world by investing in our next generation to resist and to fight in the smartest and most effective ways that we know how. The vision of this new world that I see is what brought me to the task force as a fundraiser. I want to be part of that change making. Money has so much meaning to all of us in the world, good and bad. Money speaks our voices, where we give it, where we ask for it, and it can be used for so much good. I know that fundraising is social justice, and I'm personally committed to having the donor base of LGBTQ organizations reflect all of us. So, I ask you, as a fundraiser, to give whatever you can to the organizations that best represent your values. That's how you amplify your voice in your local community, state, nationally, including the task force's Chump Change campaign. Every dollar you give will help us to fight against this very dangerous administration that we're looking at. We and all LGBTQ organizations are going to need your support. What I do is I work for a world where the label ally is no longer relevant, where we will all stand together as people with one another, whether we are Black, Asian, Latinx, white, trans, cis, lesbian, straight, documented, undocumented, Muslim, Christian, atheist, and the list goes on. And I'm going to leave you with one last thought. Today marks the 7th anniversary of my very own mother's passing. She was a woman with a very sharp tongue, and I know that she would have had some choice words to say about what just happened in Washington. But I know that she would be proud that I'm on this stage today, resisting. This one's for you, Mom. Thank you.
Tengan cuidado con la migra, my aunt would warn me, telling me to keep an eye out for immigration agents. You see, growing up in the 1980s, mass raids by US immigration and custom agents were all too common. They'd show up unannounced, sometimes in the middle of the night, at home, work, your local supermarket. To this day, local police departments across America collaborate with federal agents to identify, detain, and deport undocumented immigrants under the guise of sobriety checkpoints. Many moons ago, I won't tell you how many, before I became the proud gay Latino man that I am today, and as a child, my family lived in fear of being forcibly separated and deported to a country we didn't know. We hid from police officers, immigration agents, and quite frankly, anyone with a uniform. I didn't understand why. Why, even though I was born in the US, my family of mixed immigrant status wasn't granted the same rights and protections under the law. And apparently, California's then racist and bigoted governor, Pete Wilson, didn't understand that either. But his solution was to work relentlessly to prevent immigrants from accessing healthcare, education, and human services. Like Donald Trump, he too threatened to deport all Mexicans. Unfortunately, the terror that kept Latino families awake at night all those years ago is no longer from a dreadful past. Today, a very real and scarier threat to Latinos is a Trump presidency. I grew up in Los Angeles, California, where my dentist was Persian, my math teacher was Armenian, my barber was Salvadoreño, my bank teller was Korean, my nurse Filipina, and my congresswoman a Chicana. But my experience is not universal. In so many places, people of color experience erasure, from higher education to technology, politics, and yes, dare I say, even in the progressive movement, we, as people of color, yearn to see courageous leaders at the helm who look just like us. Not just because representation is critical, and not just because our voices are valid, but because history and the incoming administration's record have proven to us that those in the highest position of power will not fight for access and equity for all of us. They may even fight against it time and time and time again. As LGBTQ people and as people of color, we've experienced oppression at the hands of those who are responsible for protecting us, for protecting our civil rights. Many have compared last November's election results to the election of George Bush in 2000, or for my fellow Californians, the repeal of marriage equality through a ballot measure in 2008. But nothing compares to the feeling many of us felt after receiving the election results this November. For the first time in our nation's history, millions casted their vote for an openly racist, bigoted, misogynistic, and anti-LGBTQ candidate who bragged about sexual assault, incited violence, and ran under the campaign promise of criminalizing Muslims and immigrants. But his deplorable qualities apparently were not enough to deter people from voting for him. What's worse is that his party holds a strong majority in Congress, and their unregulated and unchecked power could have devastating consequences that will last for generations. Friends, colleagues, fellow activists, I can't sugarcoat this. I'm outraged. The president is a threat to the liberty and the prosperity of LGBTQ people all across America. That is why we need and we must take action. We must continue standing up to bullies, whether they oppress us behind a badge, from the pulpit, in the workplace, or even from the White House. We cannot defeat the tyranny of bigotry and hate if we don't join together and stand in solidarity and fight against the threats to everyone's inalienable rights. Despite growing up in a diverse metropolis like Southern California, there was very little I could do, my family could do, to avoid the omniscient terror of La Migra, or the US Customs and Immigration agents. The nightmare of massive raids, inhumane detention, and forced deportation is a daily lived reality of millions of immigrants. Today, 2017, not 1980-something. What calls me to this work is the hope that at least one child will not experience the hate, the violence, the racism, the homophobia, and the terror that I have. Our dream for a better world is not a fleeting memory, but a living benchmark within the grasp of our most challenging sprint. We have not considered all possible solutions when we haven't exhausted our imagination.
Won't you celebrate with me what I have shaped into a kind of life? I had no model. Born in Babylon, both non-white and woman, what did I see to be except myself? I made it up. Here on this bridge between starshine and clay, my one hand holding tight my other hand. Come celebrate with me that every day something has tried to kill me and has failed. The poet's name is Lucille Clifton, a Black woman genius who joined the great cloud of witnesses with my other ancestors in 2010. I know she had wild and rebellious dreams. How do I know this? Her poetry tells me so. The raw materials of her incarnation were offensive to whiteness, to maleness, to Americanness. So she writes that she took her own stuff, her own body, her own mind, her own heart, her own spirit, and she made a life with it. She says, I made it up. She imagined herself into being. And what she created could not be destroyed. She said, every day something has tried to kill me and has failed. What a powerful teacher Lucille Clifton is to me. My name is Naomi Washington Leapheart, and I'm the Faith Work Director at the National LGBTQ Task Force. And I think Lucille can be a powerful teacher to us because every day it seems something is trying to kill us. We're gathered here today and this weekend to figure out how we will survive this latest attack on our lives. Embedded into our present political environment is a well-coordinated, well-resourced attack on our ability to keep our bodies healthy, our ability to create family, our ability to simply be in public spaces without apology or surveillance. And that's enough to drive us to dejection, I admit. And there's another layer to this attack. It also targets our most prized possession, our imagination. This is actually my deepest concern, that anti-LGBTQ theologies and ideologies and practices have ruined our imagination. Our hopes have been stunted. We dream low-risk dreams. We believe, but only in puny possibilities. We became timid because our boldness was mocked. We suffocate under the weight of our low expectations. We tempered our anger, our righteous indignation with refrains of, "It gets better." We aimed for marriage, convinced that maybe poverty and homelessness among LGBTQ youth and trans communities were just too far outside our actual grasp. We got excited when a few folks got starring roles on mainstream TV. We forgot that so many Black and brown and Native queer bodies remain invisible. To build a movement that was palatable, we stood by while people were discarded and cut out and cut off because they were not respectable enough. Because they had the nerve to say, all the queer folk are not white. All the queer folk are not cisgender men. All the queer folk do not fit into the middle class box. They had the nerve to say, you think you know queer life when you see it. But some of us are brave. We have skin that has been kissed by the sun. We speak all languages. We have a variety of bodies and abilities. We are undocumented. And we demand LGBTQ justice, and we have no desire to be respectable. I am sad to admit that I think we have been careless with our imagination. And if we continue to be careless, we will be undone. Our adversaries already don't imagine LGBTQ people in their dreams of a free and flourishing world. They suffer from a chronic lack of imagination. And they covet, they envy, they want our imagination, because if they can get it, they can control our reality. If they can get our imagination, even before a bill is passed, even before our rights get stolen, they completely erase us. Because without an imagination, we will cease to exist, not just to them, but to our own selves. We will start to believe the lie that we are not worth much more than small change, chump change. We will start to believe the lie that we are maybe asking for too much, that we're too angry, we're too radical. We will believe the lie that our love is unnatural, that our bodies are abominable, that our lives are expendable. These are lies. As a Black queer woman minister within the Christian tradition, as the faith work director at the task force, I am particularly angry. I'm offended because our imaginations are getting preempted and co-opted under the pretense of faith. Our political adversaries have used the imaginative nature of faith to reshape attitudes about LGBTQ people. Because if you can claim that God dreamed up a world where LGBTQ people do not matter, then you can co-opt the dreams of people who think they're following God by rejecting LGBTQ people. But I'm here to tell you that all of that is actually a perversion of faith. I believe that faith is the confidence in what we hope for. Faith is the proof of what we do not see. Some of us live faith through religion, some through spirituality. Some of us find hope in humanist and non-theistic traditions. Some of us cherish the mystery of agnosticism. We are all vulnerable, no matter how we get to faith and hope. We all face the threat of exploited dreams. We can't let nobody use our imagination against us. If we're going to defeat our adversaries, we must refuse to submit our collective imagination to those who mean to kill us every day. It's time for us to recover imagination as a critical tool of creating change. That's what the task force is doing through our faith organizing. We're saying that to counter the harm done to LGBTQ people in the name of faith, we must first overhaul the way we imagine ourselves, the way we imagine the world. New imagination means our coalitions will actually last longer. New imagination means our policy agendas will be bolder and more radical. New imagination means we don't trade death by empire for death by burnout. How many people don't want to die by burnout? We want to actually live to see the day of our freedom. Lucille Clifton could defeat death because she chose to exist. She chose to dream up a life for herself. She defiantly chose to make the world around her. I want to know, do you take imaginative risks? Or is your imagination at risk? Do you have wild and rebellious dreams? That's not a rhetorical question, y'all. This political moment requires us to imagine again and again. We're not going to win by magic. We're not going to win by violence. We're not going to win because we're respectable. We will win because we proactively construct a new world that first we created in our imagination. So how then do we recover our imagination? How do we make it rebellious? When I finished seminary, I decided I could not bring myself to read another book. I was exhausted by reading. I was tired of asking questions I could never answer with the books. I was tired of waiting on some salvation to come. But since I'm my mama's child, I feel guilty if I don't carry a book everywhere I go. And so I decided if I was going to read something, I would read comic books and graphic novels and science fiction. And let me tell you, what I've discovered is that this new practice has stoked my imaginative fire. I can imagine myself bulletproof, like Luke Cage. I ain't got time to die. I can dream of organizing a movement that can adapt even when a presidential circus has come to town, like Lauren did in Octavia Butler's Earthseed books. We gotta be intentional about protecting and preserving our imagination. We must work to unbind it from other people's possession. We must give it the food it needs to grow. This is a spiritual practice, and this is a political practice. You are worthy, my dear friends, of a wild, rebellious, risky imagination. You were born with it. So if you know that this is true, that you're worthy of a rebellious imagination, then say this after me in whatever language you choose. I will not surrender my imagination.
I will not surrender my
imagination. Oh, no. If you really know that you're worthy of a wild and rebellious imagination, then shout in whatever language you choose, I will not surrender my imagination. We have all we need to resist this government that's going to corrode our imagination at every turn. So let's get rebellious with it. Let's get radical with it. Let's get risky with it. What will you do to take back your imagination? will you join me in imagining yourself into being? When people look at me crazy, when I introduce my wife and daughter from the pulpit before I preach, I say to myself, well, despite whatever you thought, we are possible. When people don't understand how we still experience joy when the empire keeps striking back, we just say, whatever you thought, we are possible. So let's be stubborn. Let's refuse to accept any contradiction between our everyday life and our wildest dreams. Lucille Clifton, my ancestor, that black woman genius, wrote another poem I like. The poem is called Why People Be Mad at Me Sometimes. This is the poem. They ask me to remember what they want me, but they want me to remember their memories. But I keep on remembering mine. Let's defiantly dream up a world together. May it be so. Ashe.
That's for our staff. Ray Carey, Kayley Whalen, Victoria, Kirby York, Cindy Tomm, Jorge Amaro, and Naomi Washington Leapheart. Thank you for your words. A couple of quick announcements. Y'all can go if you want. You could stay here too. Oh, they want a group photo. But we can do that right after the announcement. So quick announcements because workshop sessions are going to start any minute. Tonight here in the ballroom, the Agents of Change Ball, doors at 7 o'clock. So if you have come